the evolution of applications. So this section, I'm going to talk about the use cases for automation, where it started, where it evolved. I'm going to cover also the changes in the enterprise, the culture changes, the building blocks that enterprise customers expect from us. Go quickly through the portfolio of products that we have. And this will be the end of the section. I'd like this section to be interactive as much as possible. So it's not only me talking what we discovered in our study. By the way, the section is primarily based on the study that our CTO office performed just a few months ago, trying to discover the state of automation within our customers. So I'd like to get your input as well. If you see the same things as we see, if not seeing something different, let me know. Once upon a time, the automation was driven primarily as a cost-saving exercise. That's no longer the case. Cost-saving is not the biggest part of automation, the reason why people do automation. And it is still an important factor, but the other three factors, driving forces as we call them, overshadowed the purpose for doing automation. Number one is managing large-scale infrastructures. Number two is having consistency in managing infrastructure. Supporting CI/CD pipelines requires consistent infrastructure. And the last one is experience. Consumers' experience. IT infrastructure customers are developers that consume that infrastructure.
I add one extra in then, and that's to say that you would also potentially do it for trying to avoid risk or to reduce the amount of risk.
Yep.
Because if you've got people doing lots of manual things, if you can automate or script or use other techniques, you can take out the stupid human mistyping type issues that can happen. But that might be related to your scale discussion.
That's an excellent point. So I can tell you hundreds of examples. And one part of managing the risk, we have a customer that unfortunately got in the situation where they had to pay ransomware. So after this incident, they decided that they will create backups so they can roll back to those backups in the case when situation occurs. So those backups obviously have to be automated, right? So especially in the large scale, no one really can produce backups manually and roll them back when needed. So all the process, entire workflow is fully automated using Ansible playbooks. And what our study also discovered was that infrastructures with 10 storage arrays or more do require automation. It's impossible to manage large infrastructures with manual operations manually. It does not depend really on the size of the company or the vertical of the company. It really depends on how large is the infrastructure. Use case number two, or driving force number two, is infrastructure as a code. I call it essentially operational discipline because it's what we want to achieve, what the company is trying to achieve is consistency, right? So CI/CD pipelines require consistent infrastructure. From development to QA, infrastructure has to be as close as possible. From QA to production, have to be almost identical to avoid any issues. So that brings me another case or situation that I witnessed. I was part of the company that was growing so fast that they were unable to really hire people to provide operational support for the businesses. So one Friday afternoon, an alert comes. And SAP ERP is down. So the newly hired storage admin is going to vSphere, looking at data store, what's going on there. And he discovered that excessive snapshots took over the entire data store, and there's no place, there's no capacity available for ERP to work. So he started deleting those snapshots one by one. He deleted all of them. At the end, he accidentally deleted the entire data store. And this kind of situation could be easily avoided, as you said, with a simple script that would extend the data store when data store approaches the full capacity. So the last driving force is self-service. Developers got used to those cloud services, consuming cloud services in such a way that they can't really wait for services to be delivered for weeks or even days. They want services to be available pretty much now. As a matter of fact, the applications will time out if they wait for the services to be available for a few minutes. So services have to be available in less than a few minutes, meaning infrastructure has to be provisioned, including compute, networking, and storage within less than a couple of minutes. The shifts in the enterprise culture are really happening so fast that enterprises, the IT organizations, changing the way they used to work, they used to be organized. Back in the days, we had those silos. Developers were working by themselves. They're interacting with storage admin, compute admin, network admin. That's no longer the case. We're seeing, our study shows that the boundaries between operations and developers are eroding. We discovered that most of the enterprises fall in one of the three models. Transitional model, so those are the mostly enterprises that have well-defined IT policies and procedures, and they just building up on those processes and procedures, improving, adding agility and speed. The second model we're seeing is SAFe, or scale model. This is applicable to enterprises that are looking to deploy lean at a larger scale, lean and agile at a larger scale. And the last one is small team model or lean model. So the last one is very well suited for smaller projects, POCs, and things like that. So this is what we see in the organizations that are happening. We're seeing new personas being defined, right? So system reliability engineer is coming into picture. It doesn't used to be such a role, not even a few years ago. DevOps persons or personas are joining operations teams to help with automation. And as a center of the IT infrastructure, we're seeing orchestration, infrastructure orchestration layer managing and provisioning infrastructure automatically.
I just had a couple of questions to that, or at least observations. You're not really showing anybody who's actually potentially physically deploying that equipment or deciding how it should be configured before it is put in and mapped into APIs.
Yep.
You're not showing anybody who's doing any sort of automation or validation of the capacity planning and all those sort of things that have to go on in the background. So where are those tasks on the right-hand side of that diagram?
So capacity planning still belongs to operations teams. They still do capacity planning.
But are you seeing that as a separate team from the people you're showing on the slide there?
No, that's still part of the DevOps or operations team. They're still responsible. They continue to be responsible for capacity planning. The placement problem, we see some customers have automated, or I should say, in the process of automating solving this problem. So this is one of the harder problems to solve. So we see
It's difficult to automate the racking of physical equipment.
Yeah.
well, racking physical equipment is definitely continue to be manual operations. So we call it day system, more like a day one. But once that equipment is racked, ready to be used, you still need someone to decide. Okay, I need 10 GB of Isilon share. Which storage array should I use? Right, so this placement problem is still being worked on. And
so you're calling that a placement problem, and you really think so? What you're saying is you think that the SRE is responsible for saying, here's what my capacity needs to be, and then it magically just appears from just like a placement decision made by the IT team?
Some enterprises have automated this task. Others are still taking this decision manually.
Okay.
I think sometimes as well, Gina, the IT operations team, whenever you put this DevOps in, these DevOps processes into your environment, the IT team that were previously responsible for all of these manual operations, they have more time to concentrate on things like capacity planning and where stuff should go, and as to Chris's point as well, planning that infrastructure so whenever it is shipped in, whenever it is wired up, it's going to work in an automated way every time. So that's really all about, having well-defined standards for that sort of stuff.
I get that. I think what I've seen a lot from talking to customers is that SREs generally are responsible for this architecture that's being built on a public cloud. So they're responsible for that application architecture, especially if it's multiple containers that are being orchestrated together to create a new cloud type application. But when you look at bringing that on-prem, that's a different kind of thing. So you still need that type of SRE to work with the dev team to orchestrate the containers, but you need the IT team even more to be able to do some of the things you were just talking about. So is that kind of what y'all are saying, or?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Cool.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. So the best thing about automation, or the need of automation, is that automation frameworks became much more easier to consume than they used to be. IDC predicts that by 2023, infrastructure automation market is going to be $10.5 billion. So this definitely drives innovation in the area. We're seeing UI-driven workflow builders that come from Vero. We see simple-to-use, almost one-click Ansible framework. And this really makes automation process and developing automation workflows much easier than they used to be. You don't have to have developers' skills to produce simple or even complex workflows. If you learn a little bit of Python or JavaScript or any other language for that matter, you can do the magic. You can do end-to-end provisioning of your entire data center.
And you're not afraid that things are going to happen as what you just explained, someone throwing away the data store instead of...
Well, the good thing about this that there are best practices and policies that we recommend people to follow. Developing automation script doesn't mean that somebody just develops and throws this into production. Those scripts have to be tested, validated, and then put into production as any other software.
I think automation is a good way to get something right all of the time or get it wrong every single time as well. So
it's the same, right? It's not different.
Yeah, it's just different challenges for everybody. But
that will be consistent.
Yeah.
So you'll have either consistency bad decisions or that you can improve upon. You don't have much of the wiggle room for human error. That's the beauty of automation.
In your opinion, and I'll give you my experience of, say, 10 years ago, excuse me, I worked in a lot of organizations where the people who I worked with who were more senior, who looked after storage teams and various other different infrastructure teams, they were not keen on us writing our own code because they didn't want us to end up with a load of stuff that we had to support or somebody would have to support in the future. So they would push that back to the vendor like yourselves and bundle it into a project and get it to be part of the next deployment of a load of infrastructure. Are you seeing that changing then? Are you saying that companies now are much more accepting of the fact that they're going to have to write their own code internally?
Yeah, definitely. I'm probably having 2-3 conversations a week with different customers. Used to be unheard of that you'd get a bank looking at any open source software and putting it into their environment. I worked with a very large bank in in France, and we worked together on some Ansible stuff, just open source projects, and they've gone full production with some of the stuff that they're doing. So what they have is they've like cookie cutter deployments. So they've had to be really well defined and about how they're actually deploying their infrastructure. So they really have 2 or 3 different configurations that they have, and you get a different tier of storage for that. So in their case, it was all PowerMax, but their tier of storage was not so much the service level, but more so the availability. So one of them would have been like active storage with SRDF Metro. A higher level of availability then for that was having a third layer of replication of it. So they had a third site, and then for their most important stuff, the real tier 0 stuff, they had 2 legs at either end. So if we did have a break in the Metro configuration, they would always have DR, and they'd always have a recovery point objective rather than just high availability. So. But that's how they went down. I was very surprised to see that, because other companies that I've talked to and gone out and seen, they're just like, no way, unless it's supported by the vendor, we're not putting it in, and that's still the case. So it's some people are still very risk adverse on that side, but it's definitely a mix. So
yeah, there are companies that try to stay away from automation or limit number of automation. And there are companies that are jumping on the train and automating all the processes they can.
So there are different personas in the data center, and some of them are, have a Linux mentality. Others are much more Windows,
right,
point and click kind of stuff. And so in your experience, do they approach automation differently? And if so, do they use different tools? I mean, Ansible is clearly a Linux thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I never found somebody using it with Windows. Maybe it exists, maybe there are modules, whatever, but it's not a thing. I mean, and still today in the enterprise, 50, 60, maybe more machines are Windows.
Yep.
And VMware also.
Yep.
VMware systems mean lazy from this point of view. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we see diversity of tools popping up. We see Ansible used primarily by Linux shops. We see VRO, VRA used in the mostly virtualized environments. And we see PowerShell and Windows Admin Center being used in primarily Windows shops.
And then you see some VMware shops also using Ansible along with VRO and VRA as well. So they mix the two. So once they've handed off, they build in workflows at the end. And so you've provisioned your VMs, you've got your storage up to it. So why not do the rest of the Linux configuration, set your file systems up, pull down whatever packages you're going to use, and have it all sitting there for you. Which is, the beauty of this is you use the skills that you have in the environment, which is really nice.
Yep.
And there is much more choice than there was, back a few years ago, when everybody ran everything with CLI and a bash script, and that guy left the company, and everybody's afraid to touch the script because nobody really knew what it was doing, and that was. So things are a little bit, as to say, like things are definitely a lot more
sophisticated.
Sophisticated, but even it's like when I spent time back in EMC customer support, and somebody sent you a script. It wasn't always possible for us to even run that script to see exactly what it did in our environment. But with things like the API calls, it's very easy for us to actually, replicate what they have and get to the problem quickly if there is something wrong. Which is, for me, that's a big thing, and it's definitely a time saver and easier to support.
All right, so let's talk about automation building blocks. The way we see automation, that's our view. So day one is when somebody got a new storage array, they need to deploy this in within their data center or infrastructure connected. So we call it, that's day one operation. Then day two operations are ongoing storage provisioning and ongoing daily operations that need to be performed on the storage array. So that's maybe a little bit different from, say, VMware day one and day two definitions. What our customers expect from us is that we provide building blocks for them to create, so they can create complex workflows. The challenge is, well, we try to come up with the product that will fully automate storage, including any storage that Dell EMC produces, and create those nice workflows that are supposed to be working for all the customers. Unfortunately, what we discovered at the end, that requirements are so different from one enterprise to another enterprise that we cannot really adjust to all of them. So we discovered that sticking with the existing platforms, providing enablers for those platforms would be much more beneficial for us, for our customers, and for us. We will be able to provide, I guess, more value to our customers this way than building our own proprietary product. And what we discovered is that, okay, customers really see storage just as one part of their infrastructure, right? So ultimately, what they want is they want to provision an application. They want to provision Oracle, they want to provision SAP, and in order to provision Oracle application, they need to create, say, 50 virtual machines, create a network among them, add data stores, provision LUNs, create storage groups, all those kind of things. So this is end-to-end workflow automation. And from our perspective, we provide all those blocks and pieces for them to provision data stores on, say, PowerMax or Iceland. So this is what customers expect, and this is what we're delivering. At the center of all of this,
I have another question. So most of the automation that I saw in the in the field is about automating things that that have to reach a state. Okay.
Right.
So the idea is I want to configure 100 servers in the same way. If I make a mistake, I just change a script and it starts again and replicate it. Okay, when I'm okay also doing this with the networking because who cares? I mean, if everything goes wrong, I relaunch the script, I change, so data in transit. But when I start working with storage, so the only piece of my infrastructure that is stateful, that has a lot of components, I can't start deleting LANs or creating LANs because I need 100 or 1,000 LANs from my storage because I'm configuring 100 Linux systems. Okay.
Right.
There are resources. There are if I create 1,000 LANs for a script and I did a mistake. What do you do then? So it's not that you can go there and say, delete 100 LANs, because in the middle of these LANs, maybe if I made a mistake, there is some production.
Right.
It's not easy. I mean,
it's not easy. Correct. It's not easy.
So even if you give the building block, there are a lot of things that are not easy to manage when it comes to storage.
Yeah, I think it's like what Spider-Man's uncle said back in the day: with great power comes great responsibility. There's always going to be there's always risk, and whenever you are automating things, like the best thing you can do there is to test the process before you deploy to production, and that's the only way you're going to catch that. And do small batch so you catch it earlier, so there's less to roll back, so you can stage that sort of thing, and the deployment will be quicker. So there are processes that you can do within your DevOps organization to try and mitigate those things. But it's if you're going to hit go and put the pedal down with the brakes off, you might hit a wall. Like it's you have to have checks and balances in there. Like we can do stuff on our side as well, like from the storage arrays. We provide API calls that you can do pre-checks to make sure that you're able to provision beforehand, so you have the capacity, you have the resources there. And not only, it's not always about capacity, it's about performance. So we have a PowerMax API has like a workload planning function that monitors the utilization. It can actually advise you on which ports to actually put your workloads on. So those sort of things are there, and the bigger shops, and whenever they're really getting into this, they can be very smart about it. And we're still trying to get better at that. We haven't got it perfect, but we're making progress.
Is the design goal to standardize the tool set? Because DevOps is pretty wide.
Yeah, I've got
different tools in your tool belt.
Well, that's I guess we're already into the second half of the presentation at this stage. But that's the thing. Whenever you're using tools like Ansible and stuff like that, there's a way of using those tools. So whenever we've got a DevOps development team that are writing those tools. So from the Dell EMC side, even if our APIs are slightly different, from a customer experience, the processes will be the same. You want something to be there. You'll have a state of present or absent. So absent will delete it. Present will keep it there. So that sort of, that helps mitigate a little bit of that as well. And the same with some of the other stuff.
Just to add to what you said, there are also new use cases evolving where capacity needs to be provisioned, and then it'll be reclaimed back because application will do its job, like analytics, will get the necessary capacity, perform the task, and then after completing, it will wipe out all the data. So we're seeing those type of use cases as well. So it's storage is no longer just expanding one way. It is also shrinking based on the application and the use case and workload.
Yeah.